I'm just going to go through a couple of points of review to get us into the discourse, and then we'll jump discourse. So we've been discussing the concept of what we called a raya mehemna. A raya mehemna has two translations, the Rebbe said. One is that he is a faithful shepherd, in other words, a shepherd that we can always rely on. And another idea, which really becomes the whole basis of this entire discourse, is that he's a raya mehemna, that he is a shepherd of faith, that he shepherds us, actually, that the idea of the leader of the generation is that he connects us with faith, with inner faith. And we ask the question, every Jew has essential faith. Every Jew is, the Talmud refers to the Jewish people as ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. We are believers, the sons of believers, the children of believers. That's just a basic trait of the Jewish people, which, although in our day and age, doesn't necessarily seem so apparent with all of the Jewish people, but we're getting back. We're getting our faith back to our initial faith. But the question is, how is it that the leader is the one who helps the Jewish people have faith when...
One?
You have one.
Anyone.
When the Jewish people... When the Jewish people have their own faith, and that what we explained was that there's superficial faith, and then there's deep internal faith. In other words, basically put, there is the idea that we believe in God, but then there's the idea that that belief in God actually is going to affect our decision-making process. So when it comes to a matter, as we spoke at great length previously, when it comes to a matter of a challenge or a question, should I cheat somebody, for example? So I believe in God, but business is business, which is, of course, a self-contradictory statement. But that's how our minds work oftentimes. Yes, I believe in God, but I have a chance to save $10 here if I cheat, or $1,000 or $1 million if I, bend the rules a little bit. True internal faith in God means that our actions are dictated by that faith, meaning Hashem is the one who's taking care of me. And that is the faith that the Raya Mehemna, the shepherd of faith, the leader of the Jewish people, is really meant to connect us, which of course gets us back to the initial statement, Va'ata tetzave et b'nei Yisrael. You will command the Jewish people, but in the reinterpretation according to Chassidus is that you will connect, that the meaning of tzav means to connect. You will connect the Jewish people. We spoke at great length last week about the idea of a need for a leader and how our leaders are people who help us connect in a better way. Think of them as antennas. We each have a connectivity, but the antenna is going to help us get a greater, deeper connectivity. And this is the purpose of the leaders of the Jewish people, not just to give us information, which of course is important, but deeper than that, to really help instill this deep faith within us. We then went on to speak about the idea of there's a leader in every generation, and as we're comparing here, there are going to be a few different leaders that we're kind of going to be jumping back and forth through over here. So on the one hand, we were speaking about Moshe. He was the original leader that we're talking about. Then we're talking about Mordechai being the leader. Why are we talking about Mordechai in the middle of July? Because, well, we're not going to get into all the details, but basically this is the last discourse, edited discourse that we received from the Rebbe, whose Yortzeit was a couple of weeks ago. And this was a discourse that the Rebbe said on Purim Katan, on the minor Purim. So that brings in the whole theme of Purim and Mordechai in the middle of July. So as the Medrash says, that Mordechai in his generation was like Moshe in his generation. And thus we have the statement from the Zohar that there is an extension of Moshe, a projection of Moshe in each and every generation. So you have the leaders of every particular generation. So of course we have Moshe, then we have Mordechai, and then of course we're speaking about the previous Rebbe, although a lot of this is based on the discourse of the previous Rebbe, and the previous Rebbe isn't going to say outright explicitly that I'm talking about me, but it's understood that as a leader, he is fulfilling these tasks. When he's describing what the true idea of a leader is, he is fulfilling these tasks. And as the Rebbe is going to say explicitly in the Rebbe's Maimer. So we have a whole overlapping here of Jewish leadership, I would say, between Moshe, Mordechai, the previous Rebbe, and the Rebbe. And remembering what Isaac said last week, whichever Rebbe you have, right, whichever leader you have, make sure that that's a leader who's not just giving you information, but he's informing the essence of your soul, that he's really helping you have that faith. So you could have a teacher, you could have many, many teachers who teach you different subjects, different ideas, but the idea of a Rebbe is somebody who really connects you on a deep, meaningful level. And as Isaac said, you can learn from every Rebbe, right? You can learn from every Rebbe, but you have one Rebbe who is the one with whom you have that deep, meaningful connection. Okay. So then, where we last left off, so we were talking about the Moshe in every generation. I'm going to share the screen here with the discourse. Hopefully, you have the discourse printed out in front of you. So as I mentioned last week, that this was a discourse. This is, again, it's a discourse of the Rebbe that the Rebbe said in 1981, based on a discourse that his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, had said in Moscow in the year 1927. So 1927 Moscow, was that a time good for the Jews or not so much at all? Right? The latter, of course, not so much at all. And it was this discourse and this teaching that the Rebbe did publicly, notwithstanding the great danger that he was in, and he was being warned by his followers and Hasidim, right, being said, being told that, hey, there are informants here at this gathering. Nevertheless, the Rebbe ignored all of that. And because of that, the Rebbe ended up being imprisoned with a death sentence. The death sentence was commuted to exile, and the Rebbe was sent to a city called Kostroma, which probably nobody's ever heard of. That's why they use these cities for exile, cities that nobody's ever heard of. And finally, the Rebbe was released he was told of the news of his release on the 12th of Tamuz, which is tonight. So the 12th of Tamuz and the 13th of Tamuz are celebrated by Chabad, the Chabad world, as days of liberation. These are the days that the previous Rebbe was freed finally from Russia. Then he went off to Poland. This was in 1927. So he basically went from the frying pan into the fire, but little did Jewry know at that point what they were getting into. But in any case, he was saved from that situation, right? And his liberation is, the day celebrated for his liberation is tonight. It's going to be Monday and Tuesday. So the 12th and 13th of Tamuz were the days that he was finally liberated. But I'm just mentioning that because it's tonight, right? So it's truly relevant to this discourse. This was the discourse that got him into the hot water. But the hot water and the Jewish people being in hot water, the Rebbe says, this is the idea of kasis, as the verse says that the Jewish people were crushed in order to reach the luminary. So let's see, where did we last leave off? Was over here, okay. So now, so this is what the previous Rebbe explains in the bold here. It explains that in the era of exile, when everyone is broken and crushed, we're able to approach the essence of the source of light from which light emanates. So I'd like to explain an idea here, that because this concept, this theme is going to be recurring. And that is talking about essence. essence is connected, of course, to luminary, to the source of light. So there's light, there's the light that extends, but then you have the source of the light, and that is representing the essence. What do we mean when we talk about essence? So there is what we do, how we behave, what we know, and then much deeper than all of that is our essence, which is who we are essentially. Our true essence. In Hebrew, it's the etzem haneshama, the essence of the soul. And this is what the discourse is going to be getting into soon. So life, of course, is a struggle in many areas of doing what we should be doing to get closer to God, doing what we're supposed to be doing. But what we're ultimately endeavoring to get to is who we really are. Who we really are is a part of God at our essential level. And to realize, right, sometimes when a person is, for example, trying to get close to God and then they fail. Has that ever happened to anybody here? I hope so. Because if you try to get close to God, sometimes you're going to fail. And sometimes, all different kinds of things are going to get in the way. Our work is going to get in the way, and the government is going to get in the way, and our spouse is going to get in the way, and we had bad teachers and bad influence, and the rabbi of the synagogue, he gave a really bad speech, he's getting in the way, until we have the final level of growth where we understand that really there's just one person getting in the way, which is our own self. So we get in the way, and sometimes we fail. And when we fail, we can become dejected. And this is very wrong, because unfortunately, even when we fail, what is so important to remember is, okay, I failed in what I did and how I behaved, but I can never fail in who I am, essentially, my etzem, my essence. And that has to give us the restore our strength and confidence that we can try again to get closer to God, because this is who and what we truly are. So even if a person fails in what they do, a person can never fail in who they are. And this is at the core of the Rebbe's whole outreach message. And by thousands of messengers to places to reach Jews in far-fetched places. Because notwithstanding however distanced a person may be from their Judaism has not become distanced from them, because that is the definition of who they are. This is the essence. So do we understand a little bit the difference between what we do, how we act, and then there's who we really are at our core. And I'm mentioning this now because it's going to be a recurring theme, and it's a good thing to hear time and time again, so that we gain a bit of a clarity about this. And so what the Rebbe is saying is that, when you have life as usual, you have regular life, sometimes it's hard to get to the essence of who we are. Life is okay. I wake up in the morning, I say my morning prayers, I go to work, I eat breakfast, pay the bills, I study a little bit of Torah, and nothing is challenging who I really am. And so life goes on in its regular kind of a way of me doing what I need to be doing. But when I have a challenge, when I have a nisayon, a real challenge to my faith, that is when we have the capacity to reach the essence, the ma'or, not just the shining of the light, but the essence of the light, the source of the light. And that's what the Rebbe is saying over here. When everyone is broken and crushed, right? That was like at the time of Mordechai. The Jewish people they had a death sentence was hanging over the entire Jewish people. And that's when they went invigorated. Mordechai inspired the Jewish people to recommit themselves to Torah study and to the performance of mitzvot. Counterintuitive, right? As we said last time, right? You might think it's a time to lay low. Mordechai said, no, it's a time to rise up above, to strengthen our commitment. And the Jewish people acted with self-sacrifice. So because they were crushed, the essence came out. You know what happens when you squeeze an olive? Have you ever tried to squeeze an olive? Do you have olive trees in Miami? Probably not. We have in California, we have Marin. I'm in Northern California. We have olive trees. I have an olive tree in my front yard, and I know what happens when you squeeze an olive. It makes a big mess. It's a runny black liquid that doesn't smell good, and it stains your garments. And no illumination is going to come from that. How do you get the oil? Does anybody know how you get the oil from an olive? Go ahead and call out, unmute yourself if you know. Go ahead, don't be shy now. I'm sure someone knows how to make olive oil. I don't suggest you try it, but how do you get the oil out of the olive?
I think you crush the olive.
You have to crush it. It has to, absolutely correct. You have to really crush the olive, and you're going to get a little drop of oil out of that. You're not going to get, you're going to get a little drop of oil that has to be crushed. And thus our sages say that the Jewish people are compared to the zayit, to the olive, because just like an olive, when you crush it, you're able to get the oil that's going to illuminate. So too the Jewish people. When the Jewish people are crushed, you're able to bring out the oil that's going to illuminate. And this is this concept that the Rebbe says over here, that in the time of Mordechai, when the decree of Haman was hanging over the Jewish people, they brought out their essence. And so that's the idea of katit lamaor, that through the katit, through being crushed, that allows you to reach not just light, but the source of light. Why? Because through being crushed, you're able to get to the very essence of who you are, the very essence of your connection with God. Okay, so now we have, that's the third major point in the mimer. We have the idea of connection. The job of the leader is connection. The job of the leader is raya mehemne, that he is a shepherd of faith. He sustains us with faith. And idea number 3, that through being crushed, we are able to reach the essence. Okay, now we're going to move on to another concept. What I'd like to do here is, we'll read through the mimer, but I'm going to share with you the page from the actual Talmud that discusses this. And this is all going to work back to connect all of the points, not this week, but eventually we're going to reconnect all of this. Now we're going to move on to a fourth point. And the discourse of this discourse that we're studying starts with the words, and you will command the Jewish people, right? The discourse of the previous Rebbe interprets the verse in the Megillah that says, the Jews accepted what they had already begun. Okay, what does it mean the Jews had accepted what they had already begun? Let's, someone should.
Rabbi, can you mute everybody, please, because there's a lot of noise. Thank you.
I can and I will. Okay. If you want to unmute, feel free to unmute. Okay. So we're going to go to, let's see. Here we go. Let's find this. I just want to show you the verses here. You know what? I'm going to show you in a different program. It'll be easier for me to pull up. So we're going to search the Tanakh for the words Kimu v'kiblu ha-Yehudim. So we have this in the book of Esther. verse 29. Let's open it up into English. And there are a few different verses brought, but basically, this is the end of the Megillah where it says that the Jews ordained and took upon themselves, and upon their seed, upon their children, upon all those who joined them, so as it should not fail, that they should keep these 2 days, basically the 14th and 15th of Adar, according to their writings, according to their appointed times each year. Now, the Hebrew is kimu v'kiblu, that the Jews they fulfilled, the Jews fulfilled, and they took upon themselves. And what does this mean that they accepted and they fulfilled? In the Hebrew, just to show you the Kimu v'kiblu. If you see that in verse Chaf Zayin, that to be Mekayim means to fulfill, and Lekabel means to accept. So they fulfilled it and they accepted. So what did the Jewish people now accept something that they didn't accept before? In the time of Purim, are you aware of this? By the way, we're kind of shifting the focus of the mimer, just if you're saying, what does this have to do? We'll see soon how it's connected. But did the Jewish people now accept upon themselves something? Well, they accepted upon themselves, of course, the new mitzvah of Purim. But really, there's a whole different acceptance going on here. And I'm going to show you the Talmud that goes into this, and you'll see where this is all going. So this is an interesting piece of Talmud from Shabbat 88a, as you can see above here. So the verse says, and Moses brought forth the people out of the camp to meet God. Again, what is the Talmud discussing? It's discussing the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. Okay? What does that have to do with Purim? You'll find out in about 3 minutes. So Moses brought forth the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stood under the mountain. You see, they translate the word here. The actual word, it could be they stood at the lowermost part of the mountain, and they stood betachti tahar. They stood under the mountain.
Rabbi, can you
Yes.
enlarge the text a little bit?
How's that? Is that good?
That might be too much. The previous one was good.
Okay. All right. So what does it mean that it stood, another interpretation of the verse is they stood under the mountain. What the Jewish people stood under the mountain. Many of you may be familiar with this teaching from Rabbi Avdimi Bar Chama Bar Chassa. He said the Jewish people actually stood beneath the mountain itself. And the verse teaches that the Holy One, blessed be He, overturned the mountain above the Jews like a tub. Kafa aleim har kegigis. He turned over the mountain. So when it says they stood under the mountain, we don't mean at the lower part of the mountain. They were under the mountain. God overturned the mountain over them like a tub. And he said to them as follows: if you accept the Torah, excellent. And if not, here will be your burial. Very unattractive teaching, don't you think? Very unattractive teaching. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about what this means, but let's just take it at face value right now, right? That God basically coerced the Jewish people to accept the Torah. So if I want to sell you something, and basically, or if I want to buy something from you, and I basically put a gun to someone's head and say, either sell it to me or I'm going to shoot you. So would you call that a kosher sale? Would you call that a kosher transaction? Or there's a big question on the validity of that transaction?
I would think there's a question, but he offered it to other nations first and they refused. Why wouldn't he let the Jews refuse if they want to?
Right. And
Why would he have to force them?
So we have another question, which is, how can we say that God coerced the Jews? The Jews already said, Na'aseh v'nishma, before this.
Right.
It's a good question. We're not going to get into it right now, but it's a good question. Okay, it's a good point, right? I mean, he coerced them. They already said yes. Now I'm going to coerce them. Just to give you an insight, there's a Hasidic interpretation that the Jewish people had experienced so much open love of God that it was akin to being coerced. But let's just go back to the Talmud and take the Talmud at face value, because there's going to be an amazing conclusion of this piece of Talmud. So Rav Acha Bar Yaakov said, from here there is a substantial caveat to the obligation to fulfill the Torah. We have to accept it. We have to accept the Torah because our forefathers accepted the Torah. But 1 second, that was a transaction under duress. You know, if the transaction is done under duress, the whole transaction could be nullified. So maybe I don't have to keep the Torah. The Jewish people accepted it 3,300 years ago, but that was under duress. This is Rav Acha Bar Yaakov's question to Rav Avdimi. How can you say they were coerced? Well, then, this is a substantial caveat. In other words, basically, this would be a big reason why people shouldn't have to keep the Torah. Rava came along and said, yeah, even so, they again accepted it willingly at the time of Achashverosh. As it's written, the Jews ordained and took upon themselves, and upon their seed, and upon everyone. And he taught, Rava taught, the Jews ordained what they had already taken upon themselves. In other words, now at the time of Purim, the Jewish people, they were under, basically Haman was going to kill them because they were Jews. What could the Jewish people have decided to do? To become less Jewish or to become non-Jewish? We know we've had this, unfortunately, with millions of Jewish people in recent times. They tell the story of Yankel Goldberg, and he did very well, and he wanted to get into the country club. He was very successful, but of course they don't allow Jews. So he decided to change his name to Jack O'Connor, and he got the right haircut and the right suit and everything. He filled out the application, and they rejected it. They said, what's the problem? Why are you rejecting it? He says, well, look what you put for your religion. For his religion, he put Goy. All right, moving right along. So the Jewish people would have had an out in the time of Haman if they put for their application, they said, I'm a Goy, I'm a non-Jew, I renounce Judaism, and they could have saved their lives. Yet what did they do with self-sacrifice? They recommitted themselves to the study of Torah. So this is a teaching from the Talmud. So now the Rebbe asks a question on this. The question is, at the time of the giving of the Torah, the Jewish people were at the apex of divine revelation and their spiritual level. They had experienced God in Egypt, in the splitting of the sea, now at Mount Sinai. They had Moses as their leader. The Jewish people were, by and large, committed in a very deep, strong way to Judaism. But yet the Talmud says that was just the beginning. What was the culmination? What was the real acceptance? Specifically at the time of Purim, which was the nadir of the Jewish experience. The people were they were at their lowest level of Jewish observance, a time of total lack of inspiration. And how could it be, asked the Rebbe, that at the highest time, that specifically, we'll see the question here. Let me pull out the question here. So in the times of Achashverosh, by contrast, the Jews experienced the ultimate of descent. Every exile is associated with a concealment of godliness. Just like in Egypt, it says they didn't listen to Moshe because of their dwindled spirit and hard toil. And so too, every exile is basically the inability to listen to Moshe, to the leader, to anybody who's giving you good advice and connecting with God. And particularly in the time of Haman, there was even a greater veiling and concealment. And the very lives of the Jewish people were endangered. Nevertheless, the time of the giving of the Torah, when the Jews were on the sublime peaks, was merely a beginning. And it was at the time of Haman's decree, when apparently the Jews were at their lowest depth, that they accepted what they had begun at the giving of the Torah. So what's the reason for this? How is this possible? We should all know from what we've learned above. The Mimer continues explaining that at the time of Haman's decree, the Jews' observance of Torah and mitzvahs was inspired by self-sacrifice. They exhibited self-sacrifice, how? By not denying God and the Torah. Basically, they could have renounced Torah and not been killed by Haman. They had self-sacrifice to continue, and not only continue, but to re-strengthen their Judaism. And who was it that inspired this re-strengthening of Judaism? And it was Mordechai, who was the Moshe of the generation, who inspired this self-sacrifice. So, you know, I just to give a little contradistinction, is it always a time of self-sacrifice, or sometimes is it a time that we have to kind of give in to what's happening? You know, there's a famous sage who said that you have to know when to hold them, and you have to know when to fold them. You heard him? He was Yekusiel Rogers, Kenny Rogers.
Singer.
He was a singer. All right, a singer. So this is, of course, a very, very famous phrase, right? When just to give you an example, when the Romans had besieged Jerusalem, there were a lot of Jews who said, "Let's fight." They were called the Biryonim. And they felt that we had to fight, to the death. And this was the whole story with Masada, of Jewish people who were, fighting for their independence. What did the rabbis say? The rabbis at that point said, no, it's not a time to fight. Of course, they weren't going to give up their Judaism. That wasn't really the question. But the rabbis had said, this is a time that we have to give in to the Romans. The Biryonim, on the other hand, said, no, we have to fight. And the Biryonim were trying to get the Jewish people to fight against the Romans. They had been fighting, from previous times, right? And this fighting spirit of the Jews continued with the famous Bar Kokhba revolt that happened 100 years later. But at this point, the rabbis were saying, no, it's not time to fight. We just have to sit it out. And the Jews had plenty of food and provisions in Jerusalem to last for many years. The Biryonim went and burned it all down. And that is what led to then the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple at that point. Why am I mentioning this? It's not like the rabbis always say we have to fight. Sometimes the rabbis say, no, this is not our fight to fight. But who has that information is the Mordechai of the generation, the Moshe of the generation. So it was Mordechai, the Moshe of the generation, who inspired the self-sacrifice. On this basis, we can understand the verse that the Jews accepted what they had already begun, that the giving of the Torah was merely a beginning, and their acceptance came at the time of Haman's decree. for their actual expression of self-sacrifice in the observance in Torah and mitzvahs elevated them in this regard to a level above that experienced at the giving of the Torah. Therefore, this was when the acceptance of the Torah took place, that the Jews accepted. Since it was done with self-sacrifice, in a certain sense, they were far beyond the level of the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. It doesn't feel that way. It's not a time where we have divine revelation. And this is just at this point, I'd like to share with you a very important takeaway. You know, in life, sometimes due to health, lack of health, or lack of mental health, or lack of good circumstances to study Torah or to do mitzvot, it can be difficult because sometimes it can be challenging to fulfill our Jewish duty with happiness, with joy. And sometimes we think, how poor is our contribution? And we feel maybe uninspired to do it for all of the various reasons that we give, and some of them might even be valid. The point here is when it's a difficult time, when you're having difficulty in your own self, bringing yourself to do it, you have a challenge, but yet you commit yourself to doing it, to perform the mitzvah, whatever the mitzvah is at that point. Sometimes the mitzvah is going to synagogue, observing the Shabbat. Sometimes it's holding our tongue, not saying the words that we feel we want to say, and holding those words back because they can be hurtful words, and saying, I'm going to have self-sacrifice and keep the mitzvah that is in front of me. It doesn't feel so uplifting, but that lifts us up to a much higher degree than the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, because it requires a certain level of self-sacrifice. This is amazing. The above appears to provide us with the explanation of this phrase, crushed for light. That is, through being crushed, one approaches the light. Now, crushed, we each experience being crushed in our own life for various reasons, whether, again, all of the different circumstances. We all experience being crushed. Don't resent it. Don't regret it. Don't even complain about it. All right, you can complain a little. But the point is that the situation of being crushed is an opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah in the state of being crushed. And that helps us draw out who we are, essentially. This explains why at the time of Haman's decree, the Jews were able to attain these peaks of self-sacrifice. The high levels of self-sacrifice stem from the essence of a soul, a level which transcends revelation. It is the source of light from which light emanates. Thus, because the Jews were crushed, the essence of their soul, the light, meaning the luminary, was revealed. And that's why it says in the verse, going back to the original verse, let's see, this is top of page 5. Let's go back to the original verse here. I'm just going to switch over to another document so we can see the verse. We said, and you shall command the people of Israel, meaning you shall connect, and they will bring you pure beaten olive oil. And they will bring you pure beaten olive oil for the light. For the light, as I said, is the luminary. What's the difference between light and luminary? Light is a projection. Luminary is the source of the light. And the point that the Rabbi is making here is that oftentimes in life, we are looking for the revelation. We like revelation. We love revelation. We love when something is revealed to us. But there's something higher than revelation, and that is the essence. This is a very lofty Hasidic idea and Kabbalistic idea. But the highest level is specifically something that is not articulated. Once something can be articulated, it's already a level. Once it's a level, it's already hierarchical. It means that now it's in a system. And a system is already a means to an end, a way to get from here to there. And a way to get from here to there, this all has to do with revelation. This is all life, by the way. It's all very important and it could be very holy, but it's all aside from the essence. The essence is not hierarchical. The essence is not about a level. The essence is who you are essentially. And so light, illumination, is a revelation. The ma'or, the source of the light, is about the essence. Are you getting this? Are you getting this this idea here? This two-prong approach? Dichotomy, I guess that's the right English word, right? We have the essence, what it truly is, and then the revelation. The revelation is how it relates to a large degree. There's a lot to be said about this, but it's going to be coming up more and more again in the mimer. And that's why I kind of want to differentiate between the two. You know, you can have a child and let's say you have a child who totally rebels against the parents. The parents may no longer be able to show the revealed love, but the essential love is always there. The essential love is always there. The child might feel far from the parent, but the child in the heart of the parent is never very far away at all. It's always part and parcel of the parent's heart. This is the essence. Doesn't have to do with what the child has done, how they've behaved, what they know, who they are, what they've become. It is the essential bond. You understand what I'm saying when I'm talking about essence here? It transcends level, it transcends achievement, it transcends knowledge. It even transcends faith to a large degree, although maybe faith might be the way that we access it. So now we're going to, what we're now going to jump into is section 5 of the mimer. And now we're going to get into the anatomy of the Jewish soul. And it'll help us understand these ideas of where the faith is coming from and which level it's coming from, and how we actually have different layers and levels of our soul that can bring us to a deeper realization. So, and the Rabbi prefaces it by saying that, talking about the structure of the previous Rebbe's mimer, which explains the phrase crushed for the light, following the explanation of Moshe as a shepherd of faith. It would appear that these two concepts are interrelated. Okay, so in other words, looking at now, trying to get a bird's eye view of the mimer. What brings us to the essence? This is not a rhetorical question. Go ahead and unmute and try to give an answer. There's actually two answers that we could give from the discourse that we've studied so far. What brings us to our deepest, most profound connection? Our essence. So what we've said until now is that being crushed, right, the olives, being crushed, that's what leads to the luminary. But nevertheless, this idea was shared after explaining the idea of the leader of the generation, the Moshe of the generation. And so now the Rebbe is going to connect this idea of reaching the essence to the process of the leader being the shepherd of faith, bringing us to faith, and how they are related, how they're interconnected. Now, And here we're going to talk about the uniqueness of the belief of a Jew in God, that they believe with simple faith and they do not require any proof. Okay. Now, there are a lot of Jews where I live who maybe do require some proof, but you can't prove God. So what are you going to do? So, but the basic, and this is a Hasidic dictum based on the Talmud that says that we are ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim, we are believers, the children of believers. So there are two different places where that internal faith comes from. But in order to get this, I got to share with you another piece of Talmud. A lot of this art, because it's also helpful when learning the discourse to understand how this is taken really from Talmudic ideas, but then we're bringing out maybe another layer, a deeper concept. Let me just quickly find this. It's amazing what you can do.
Rabbi, can I make a comment?
Oh, please.
The harder somebody pushes, the more the Jews, we have a tremendous belief. Okay, nothing can stop us. We have our own state and nothing can stop us. So really, anybody that's tried to push us down, that only makes us stronger.
Someone used a line, something along the lines of, we excel in impossible. That's our, that's what we do. We do impossible. But yes, absolutely. All right, so now we're going to get to an interesting story. You're going to see how the story relates soon. So speaking about Daniel, the Talmud was talking about Daniel, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. The Gemara notes, in certain respects, the latter three were greater than Daniel, and in certain respects, Daniel was greater than the three of them. They were greater than he as they were prophets, and he was not a prophet. Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi were designated to transmit their vision of God to the Jewish people, but Daniel was not designated to share his vision with others. And he was greater than they as he saw the vision and they did not see the vision. There was a certain vision of God. Well, let's see what happened here. The Gemara asks, it says in the book of Daniel, I guess I should have started with the book of Daniel. It says that Daniel saw the vision. Haggai, who are we talking about? Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi did not see the vision, but Daniel saw and they trembled.
Rabbi?
Yes.
I'm just asking, are you reading something that's supposed to be on the screen? Because we're still seeing the mimer.
Okay. I will try again. Thank you. How's that? You see the new,
Yes.
The Gemara asks, right?
Yes.
So since they did not see the vision, what is the reason that they were frightened? They trembled. It says that Daniel was the only one who saw. They didn't see. Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi did not see, but they trembled. What were they trembling? They didn't see it. The Gemara answers a very interesting answer. Although they did not see the vision, their guardian angels saw it. And they were overcome with fear and fled. Okay? In the language of the Gemara, well, I don't know about the translation here is their guardian angel. But that's not what the Gemara says. It says, even though they did not see, afalgav de ihu lo chazi, mazlaihu chazi. Their mazel saw. We talk about mazel, and we can have just a whole class just on discussing what this word means. Mazel doesn't really mean luck. Mazel is a deeper source of blessing from above. And mazel is actually referring to a higher level of the soul. And so They did not see, but their mazel, a deeper level of their soul, did perceive it. And because their deeper level of their soul, in other words, let's think of it in terms of subconscious. Does your subconscious affect you? Tremendously. And your unconscious, I mean, these are levels that we're not even aware of. But they have a greater impact on us than our conscious mind. This is what recent study into the subconscious has revealed. It's amazing. And sometimes Ravina said a very interesting thing here. Ravina said, conclude from it that in the case of this person who becomes frightened with no apparent cause, although he does not see what causes his fear, his mazel sees it, his inner level of the soul. Here he translates it as guardian angel, but we're going to say the inner level of the soul does see it.
Rabbi,
Yes.
if mazel is such a high level, why do we have to say mazel tov?
So that it should become revealed.
Tov is good.
Right? So what should you say?
Mazel is already a higher level. It must be very good.
What we're saying is that the mazel that you have that is definitely good should become revealed. And that's what we mean by good. By good, we mean it should become visibly good, that you should feel it, you should experience it in your life. Because sometimes you could have this tremendous level in your deep level of your soul, but you don't feel it. So now, getting back, where does our faith come from? This is now quite a discussion here. The discussion here is, where does our faith come from? This is the discussion, amazing discussion. So answer A, to borrow an expression, his mazel perceives, that is, the soul as it exists in the spiritual realm sees godliness. Indeed, the soul's perception transcends the power of thought. It's our subconscious, our unconscious mind. This, in turn, affects the soul as it is enclosed within the body, imbuing it with faith. So this is the level of mazel. Mazel meaning a higher level of my soul definitely, absolutely believes in God. We need to understand something. I want to explain this. We'll get into this more next week because we're coming to the end, and we'll review this and go into it in greater depth. There are many levels of the soul. Anybody know how many levels of the soul there are?
5.
5 levels of the soul. Believe it or not, the
I say 7.
there are 5.
Okay.
5 levels.
The Medrash actually lists the 5 levels of the soul. They are nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. Yechida is the very essence of the soul. And then there's something even higher, as we're going to see in this discourse, which is the essence, the very essence of the soul with no name. Why do we need? Yeah.
Yehudis has a comment to make.
Oh,
Okay.
please, can you unmute?
I am unmuted.
Oh, okay. Oh, go ahead. This is Yehuda speaking.
No,
No.
it's a husband, but he's Yehudis.
Oh, I'm sorry. Whoever has a comment or a question, please speak up.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. There are 5 levels to the soul. When the body is in utero, 3 levels descend into the fetus, and 2 levels stay in the higher world, my understanding. And the core of the soul, the 2 highest levels are still in the upper worlds. And when a person in this world does something, they'll feel cognitive dissonance if it doesn't jive with 2 levels in the higher world. However, if what you're doing jives is in line with the 2 levels of the Yehidus and the other level in the higher world, then you feel this feeling of complete peace. And that complete peace in your whole soul, take all 5 levels of the soul, then you feel very peaceful and you feel Hashem's presence. And I know when I first walked into Chabad house, I felt that presence. When I went into the mikveh, I felt that presence. I was in complete harmony, complete harmony, with no cognitive dissonance. If I walked into, God forbid, not Orthodox place of worship, I felt dissonance. I felt I had to get out of there. It's wrong. But if I walked into a shul, a Chabad place, I feel so peaceful. And my home is so peaceful. Everything's in line with my two levels of the soul in the upper world.
Absolutely,
And-
absolutely. And this is the point that the mimer is saying, that the first, and thank you for sharing that. Your name is Yehudis?
Yes.
Yehudis. Thank you
Yes.
for sharing that, Yehudis. So that's the what the mimer is saying, is that we have these two higher levels. The penultimate level is called the chaya, and that would be kind of the level of this mazel that's being referred to in this discourse. So when your higher level gets it totally, your lower level gets it a little bit. It, so to speak, drips down into your conscious mind. And so a Jew in his conscious mind believes. Why? Because his higher level sees it. Again, going back to the story with Daniel, it says that Daniel saw and he trembled, and the guys who were with him also trembled, but they didn't see. So the Gemara says, because even though they didn't see, but their mazel, their higher level saw, but that what your higher level sees is going to have an impact on your lower level. There's another interesting discussion about this. It says many places in the Talmud, it talks about heavenly voices, what's called a bat kol, that there's a bat kol that makes an announcement, like it makes an announcement, return you wayward sons, or it talks about the importance of the study of Torah. And Chassidus asks the question, what's the point of these heavenly announcements if we can't hear them? Right? I mean, it's a wonderful message, but we don't have internet service. We don't get it. So Chassidus explains that the higher, our mazel hears the announcement and it filters down. Sometimes we have this unexplainable feeling to return to God or to recommit ourselves to Torah study. And what it's coming from is possibly was that announcement that was made in heaven. It's happening on our unconscious level, a level totally beyond our consciousness. But it actually does have an impact on us. And so where does the faith of the Jewish person come from? Because their mazel sees God. And so our lower level of our soul accepts it as a given. And us, even in our conscious mind, we believe in God, period. The second level is yet a more profound level. We'll get to, God willing, next week. If anybody has any closing remarks, ideas, questions, please speak up. Yehudis?
Yes. When I first went through Tanya, and by the way, I have a background in psychology. When I first went through Tanya, I felt that Freud's theory came from this, the unconscious and superconscious, etc. I feel like he was Jewish. I think he may have read Tanya and drew his ideas from that.
Absolutely.
And by the way, you can also see Jung's theories in there too, the collective unconscious, further on in Tanya. They were Jewish. They took their ideas from Tanya.
Very possible. Very good. All right. Well, thank you all for sharing, and we will see you, God willing, next week on Monday.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much,
Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Good day,
Thank
everybody.
you, Rabbi. Bye all.
Rabbi,
Yes.
what is the answer for those Jews where they say that our worst enemies will come from amongst us? And some of the things that some of our Jewish leaders do really have a very bad repercussions. What is the answer there? Obviously, their souls are looking in a different direction, apparently.
The Lubavitcher Rebbe had a very interesting way of dealing with all of this pushback, shall we say, or the people who, quite frankly, don't believe in the Torah from Sinai, right? You're talking about leaders who don't believe in Torah from Sinai.
Whether they believe or not, they do things that are against the interests of the Jewish people in terms of survival.
Yeah. So we have to make the inroads where we can. You know, the Rebbe's position has always been to not start fights with groups with whom we disagree, but just push forward with light. You can't chase away darkness with a broom, is the way the saying goes. So there's a lot of darkness being created by what I'll call false leaders. And we say, oh, they create such darkness, let me go get my broom. The way you chase away darkness is by lighting a candle and by increasing and making a connection with another Jew. They're speaking to 10,000 Jews and I'm just speaking to one. It just takes one. It just takes one. And that is really, I feel that it's very important. We have to remove our emphasis from those people who are creating darkness. And we have to put down our broom and take out a candle. How's that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I can't, B, you have to unmute. You have to press the unmute.
Yeah, okay. Does each of us have an angel that assists us in this work that you're describing?
No, the boss says.
There are forces, and we're focusing on the idea of the levels of the soul. Could they manifest in the form of an angel, or could there just be separate angels that are assisting us? I would say absolutely. I'm not sure what the connection is so much, because here you saw the Talmud, Rabbi Steinsaltz's Talmud translates the level of Mazel as being a guardian angel, right? So that would certainly indicate that according to some opinions, we're talking about a level of our guardian angel. Where the soul stops and the guardian angel begins, I'm not sure. It might be one seamless loop. I'm not sure, but we do have angels helping us. And these are divine forces meant to help us in our struggles in our life.
That we don't see, but they're there.
Not. Absolutely, yeah, correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Yes. I just want to mention that a number of years ago, there was a movie that came out, and it wasn't circulated throughout the movie theaters. It was kept within the Jewish community. I don't know, especially the Sfaradim were the ones that were showing this movie. It was called Hamasima X. I don't know if you ever saw it. It's about the interaction between Olam Haba, Shemayim, and this world, and the different levels, how people were actually interacting between, the angels and this world. I can't see, they didn't put it on YouTube, but if somehow or another you could cultivate it again, if you're able to find it, and because a lot of the people I think would be interested, the people in this program would be interested in seeing it. It was excellent. It really explains everything that you're talking about. Interesting, very interesting. I want to make a certain, I don't know, maybe I should keep this to myself. But of course, now that I've said that, I'm just going to irritate you. So I have to say, where divine revelation ends, strong mental illness begins. And sometimes it's a little bit hard. I mean, you could have people who are suffering from schizophrenia, different forms of mental illness, that are going to have something that is akin to a divine revelation or a revelation of the world to come.
And in fact, our rabbis say in the Talmud that from the time that prophecy was ceased, the prophecy was given to crazy people. And the Talmud says, the problem is you don't know when it's a prophecy and you don't know when it's crazy, right? So I am, unless somebody is speaking from a level, unless I know the person to be totally grounded in their mental facility, right? I am hesitant to hear about their experience of afterlife. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. First of all, number one, I absolutely believe the afterlife exists and that people do have interaction with it. But I certainly don't believe everybody coming into my office telling me that they experienced it, that they necessarily experienced it. I just want to make that, and there's a video, you're talking about a video where it talks about this. If you're talking about righteous people who are, scholars in Judaism who have had this and they are grounded mentally, that's one thing. Other times you have all different kinds of levels of crazy going on, and people can read passages and come up with their own imaginations with all different things. I just want to, something that I'd see on the internet to me would, or a movie that I would see would automatically.
Let me mention, this movie was shown by an Orthodox synagogue here in Florida.
More than one.
And it was Shaarei Ezra was the name of the synagogue where they brought, this was not just any kind of movie that was let loose. This was shown by from Israel. Right. And I can't find it again, but it would be very interesting.
I would be surprised if there would not be Orthodox rabbis who don't share my opinion and would share this movie. And the movie could be absolutely 100% valid and everything. So I'm just sharing my own personal reservation. Not that all of this couldn't be true, but I'm just a little, I don't doubt in Olam Haba. I just doubt sometimes in people's report of it. And you said
it was very Kabbalistically put. It was very Kabbalistic, this movie, and
okay,
it was.
Let's get the name of it again. Go ahead.
It was called Hamasima X, and it was shown here in the beach, in Miami Beach, at Shaarei Ezra. This is about I don't know how many years ago would you say, about 7, 8 years ago. I don't know.
Also in Hollywood
and also in Hollywood at Nativas Ezra, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken. It was also another Beit Knesset. It was shown, but it was excellent, very, and it really explains.
No, it was shown in Rabbi Arakis.
The rabbi here in also in Hollywood, Rabbi Arakis. I only know him from his last name, Rabbi Arakis. He's a Mizrahi rabbi.
I heard that he really rocked.
Yeah, he's the one who presented it, gave the presentation, and it was very well put together, and it really showed the interaction between this world and
Well, now I'm gonna have to go take a look at it.
Yes, if you can find it, I've tried to find it myself, but it's very well put together. Yeah.
You have access to the dark net?
No, I don't. I don't.
Rabbi, I have a question, another question. And all these different levels that we're talking about, good and evil and faith and so forth, reminds me of Dante's various levels. Do you think that Dante took his connections from the Bible, or not exactly?
You know what? I'm not familiar with Dante. I'm not familiar. You're talking about a writer, a philosopher?
Right, exactly. And there were various levels of, hell, so to speak, but also goodness.
Right. So like the paint, I'm familiar with the painting, but that wasn't done by Dante.
I don't think so.
But it was a painting of what he had described in his Inferno.
So these ideas of hell have always been a fascination of a certain aspect of all religions.
Yeah.
And there's plenty that's spoken about in rabbinic literature about it. But to answer your question about Dante, imagination, a little truth mixed with a lot of imagination.
Well, that's literature. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right? But it's not coming from our sources, no.
Okay.
It's a very weird thing because really when you have descriptions of Gan Eden in the Talmud. The problem is when you read it, it's problematic, okay? Because imagine trying to describe a three-dimensional object to a two-dimensional character. That's the problem that's given, that's explained in these areas, right? So you're speaking to a drawing, right? Well, each of us on the screen are like a we're like a two-dimensional creature, but just to make it much clearer, right? So we have our two-dimensional creature here, Chaim. I'll call him Chaim, okay? And I'm speaking to Chaim, and I'm saying, Chaim, let me explain to you what a three-dimensional person is like. You know why I don't like speaking to two-dimensional characters? Because they have no depth. So our problem is whatever word I'm going to use to try to describe depth, right? Right, is not going to work for him. You understand why? And you know how we make those little lines and we do shading and different things to show depth? That only works for us because we know what three dimensions are. But when you're speaking to a two-dimensional character, they're not going to see three dimensions. So B, I'm trying to answer your question. We're told about heaven, we're told about hell, but it's all happening in a spiritual realm, a different dimension, a dimension that we can't really perceive. And the joy of Gan Eden is far beyond what we can imagine. Let's just put it simply. Imagine your greatest nachas that you've ever had in life. Your greatest feeling in your heart filled your heart with nachas. Ah, man, those are wonderful. Now just multiply that by 1,000, okay? But even that is just a numerical comparison, right? But we can't really imagine whatever suffering we suffer in this world is so. So it's all a conceptual idea. So when you start to put it into words of physical descriptions, we have to understand that it is essentially limited, right? There's going to be a distortion there, like the distortion of trying to explain three dimensions to our two-dimensional Chaim here, right? And you know, when Chaim finally says, "Oh, I get it," guess what? It doesn't.
Okay.
He didn't.
Thank you, Rabbi.
He didn't. All right. You're very welcome. We'll see you, God willing, next week on Monday. Be well. Have a wonderful
Go good.
Thank you, Rabbi.